Chapter 81 I Am Hers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sui gathered up the items she'd taken out and placed them in front of Zhou Jinchuan. He just sat there, not moving, like he had no intention of leaving. She didn't want to rush him out, so she poured him a glass of water, handed it over, and told him again to take care of the kid. Zhou Jinchuan had intended to drop off the things and head back, but once he sat down, he got comfortable. It was rare for her to talk so much, and he was really enjoying it. He just kept smiling at her. Sui, feeling a little self-conscious, finally blurted out, "It's getting late." Zhou Jinchuan nodded. "Yeah, I've been busy all day and haven't eaten. It's definitely time for dinner." Sui suddenly remembered she'd skipped lunch. 2 bananas were all she'd had. She was starting to feel hungry. Zhou Jinchuan saw it in her face. "Come on, let's grab a bite. Then I'll head back." He headed for the door. Sui grabbed her coat and followed him. Just a short walk from the guesthouse was a state-run hotel. Sui figured that's where they were going, but Zhou Jinchuan kept walking past it. "There's a new restaurant up ahead. Let's check it out." When Sui heard private restaurant, her eyes lit up. She was planning to open her own little place next year, so she considered this a research trip. They walked a bit, and sure enough, they found a restaurant with a brand new sign at an intersection. It was dinner time, and people were streaming in. They found a table, and a waiter immediately appeared with menus. The service was great, and the menu was way more interesting than the state-run place. Zhou Jinchuan handed her the menu. "Order whatever you want." Sui looked it over, discussed it with him, and they ordered some meat and vegetables, adding, "I don't eat much at night." Zhou Jinchuan took the menu and added some hand-pulled lamb, mutton soup, rujiamo sandwiches, and osmanthus cake. "That's way too much food." "It's okay. You're here. This lamb is famous. Try it." The waiter quickly brought the osmanthus cake. Zhou Jinchuan slid the plate in front of her. "Go ahead, try it." Sui was starving. She grabbed a piece and dug in. "Wow, this is good. Want a bite? Maybe we can get the rest to go and give it to your kids." Zhou Jinchuan smiled, took a piece, and tasted it. It was sweet and delicious. The rest of the dishes arrived quickly. Sui was a bit shy at first, but she relaxed as she ate. Just then, 2 guys walked in, Jiang Yuan and Lu Zi. The guys Sui had met shopping. After Lu Zi took Sui back to the guesthouse, Jiang Yuan was kicking himself. As soon as Liu Zi returned, he asked which guesthouse she was staying in. He ditched his business and drove straight to the guesthouse with Liu Zi. But after waiting for a while, no one came out. The guesthouse staff, seeing they weren't exactly upstanding citizens, wouldn't tell them which room she was in. They waited until they were hungry. Then Lu Zi had an idea. "It's dinner time, right? Maybe she went to eat nearby." So, they checked the state-run hotel. No luck. They kept walking until they saw Sui outside the new restaurant. Jiang Yuan grabbed Liu Zi and dragged him in, almost to the front. He realized there was a dude sitting across from Sui. Jiang Yuan and Lu Zi exchanged glances and sat down at the table next to Sui. Sui was focused on eating and didn't notice them. Zhou Jinchuan had spotted them as soon as they walked in. Seeing them staring at Sui, he turned and glared back. "What's your problem?" The 2 men saw Zhou Jinchuan's glare, as sharp and cold as a knife. They quickly looked away. Nothing. Hearing the noise, Sui looked over. "Hey, it's you guys." She explained to Zhou Jinchuan, "I met them shopping today. I bought bananas from them." Zhou Jinchuan just nodded. "Eat up. I'm stuffed. Let's head back then." "What about all this food? Why don't we box it up?" They packed up the leftovers, and Sui nodded a quick goodbye to Jiang Yuan and Lu Zi. Then she followed Zhou Jinchuan out the door. Sui didn't think anything of it. She figured it was a coincidence, and she didn't want Zhou Jinchuan to know about her shopping spree, so she was eager to leave. Little did she know, Jiang Yuan and Liu Zi had come looking for her. Sui and Zhou Jinchuan had barely left when Liu Zi sighed and slumped in his chair. "Yuan, that girl's beautiful, no doubt, but she's got a boyfriend. You should let it go." Jiang Yuan, remembering her face without the scarf, scoffed. How do you know they're a couple? Maybe they're brother and sister. Lu Zi gave him a look. Dude, did you see how that guy looked at us? Like he wanted to kill us. They're a couple. And that guy is scary. You can't win against him. Let it go before you get hurt. Jiang Yuan pouted, got up, and left without eating. I don't want to hear you being negative. When I get rich, I'll be better than him. He stormed off toward the guest house. Meanwhile, Zhou Jinchuan walked Su Yi to the guest house, gave her some advice, and watched her go upstairs. He stood outside for a minute, thinking about the two guys from the restaurant. He decided to give them a piece of his mind before heading back, but as he turned, he saw them walking toward him. They saw Zhou Jinchuan too, and it was too late to hide. Their eyes met, and Zhou Jinchuan hooked his finger at Jiang Yuan. Come here. We need to talk. Jiang Yuan started to step forward, but Liu Zi tried to stop him. We just want to get to know each other. Make friends. Zhou Jinchuan narrowed his eyes, looked him up and down, and said, she doesn't need friends like you. Jiang Yuan puffed out his chest. You're her brother, right? This is a free country. You can't control who she makes friends with. No, Zhou Jinchuan said. I'm not her brother. Then who are you to her? I'm hers. Chapter 82, Stayed downstairs all night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Liu Zi heard this, he pulled Jiang Yuan back. Jiang Yuan protested, are you sure you're not just saying that? Get her down here and tell her to my face. Zhou Jinchuan, who had been holding back, stepped closer, his patience wearing thin. He looked down at Jiang Yuan. You think you're tough? Jiang Yuan flushed with anger and threw a punch. Zhou Jinchuan didn't even flinch. He caught Jiang Yuan's fist, gave a gentle shove, and Jiang Yuan stumbled backward. I haven't even gotten started yet. You should leave before things get ugly. Liu Zi, realizing Jiang Yuan was outmatched, dragged him away. Zhou Jinchuan watched them go, a worried expression on his face. He didn't want them bothering Su Yi after he left. He borrowed a phone from the front desk and called home, telling Xiao Wu to lock the doors. Then, with a determined look, he got in his car. Meanwhile, Su Yi had returned to her room, washed up, turned off the light, and gotten into bed, completely unaware of the commotion downstairs. But Qin Yinfeng, in the next room, had noticed the two guys lurking around downstairs earlier that evening. They'd even been asking the front desk about a girl, and from their description, he knew they were talking about Su Yi. Now, seeing Zhou Jinchuan almost come to blows with them, he knew they were after Su Yi. He wanted to go down and help, but Bai Ruolin stopped him. Captain Zhou's got it covered. Why would we need you to step in? Besides, she added, if you want to blame someone, blame Su Yi. She shows up and suddenly attracts a couple of goons. Qin Yinfeng glared at her. That's ridiculous. Go to sleep. You have a train to catch in the morning. Bai Ruolin rolled her eyes. Why aren't you sleeping? Qin Yinfeng was worried the two guys might still cause trouble for Su Yi. I'll wait a little longer, he said, annoyed. Bai Ruolin stomped her foot and went to sleep. The next morning, Su Yi got out of bed and stretched. Seeing the time, she quickly got dressed, washed up, and got ready to head downstairs with her luggage. Just as she stepped out, she ran into Qin Yinfeng and Bai Ruolin, who were also catching the train. Qin Yinfeng asked quickly, did anyone knock on your door last night? Su Yi looked confused. What do you mean? Seeing she looked fine and seemed to have slept well, Qin Yinfeng shook his head. Never mind. Since we're all going the same way, want to head to the station together? Bai Ruolin, who joined them, scoffed. You have the nerve to ask what he means. Yesterday, a couple of thugs were asking about you and hanging around downstairs for hours. Don't tell me you had nothing to do with that. Su Yi was taken aback. Two thugs. Could it have been Jiang Yuan and Liu Zi? When was this? Qin Yinfeng frowned. They showed up shortly after you and Captain Zhou went downstairs yesterday. They came back in the evening after you got back from dinner, but Captain Zhou chased them off. Sui was stunned for a moment. Oh, thanks. She walked past them and checked out. As soon as she stepped outside, she spotted a familiar car downstairs. At first, Sui thought she was mistaken, but she rubbed her eyes and looked again. Zhou Jinchuan was leaning back in the driver's seat, his eyes half closed. Sui hurried over and knocked on the window. Captain Zhou, what are you doing here? Didn't you leave last night? Zhou Jinchuan, a light sleeper, had only dozed off near dawn. He woke up instantly at the sound of her voice. You're here. I was going to head out, but it was late, and I figured it wasn't safe to drive at night. Sui was puzzled. Then why didn't you just get a room? Zhou Jinchuan smiled but didn't answer. He glanced at his watch. There's still time for breakfast. I'll take you to the train station after. He started to get out of the driver's seat. Qin Yinfeng and Bai Ruolin were shocked to see Zhou Jinchuan had stayed there all night, especially Bai Ruolin, who still harbored a secret hope about Zhou Jinchuan. She'd thought if he stayed single, she'd have time to get closer to him later. The future was long, and there was always a chance, but Zhou Jinchuan seemed like a changed man. He, who used to be indifferent to romance, had actually waited for Sui all night. This realization left Bai Ruolin shaken. She glared at the two of them, speechless. Finally, Qin Yinfeng pulled her away. Sui noticed the dark circles under Zhou Jinchuan's eyes and remembered what Qin Yinfeng had said. It all clicked into place. An unexpected feeling washed over her. He really waited here all night. In this cold? Her throat tightened. You must be freezing. Zhou Jinchuan smiled. I have a military coat in the car. I was wearing it. Sui nodded. Take it out and put it on. It's still chilly this morning. Zhou Jinchuan obediently opened the car door, got the coat, and put it on. They went to a nearby cafe for breakfast. Sui felt bad, worried he'd get sick from being up all night. When she got up to get hot water, she secretly added a few drops of spiritual spring water to his bowl. After breakfast, his slightly haggard face had regained its color. Only then did she feel relieved. Captain Zhou, just head back after breakfast. The train station's close. I can walk. Zhou Jinchuan glanced out the window. It's snowing, and the roads are slick. I'll drive you. It's no trouble. Sui looked up and saw the snowflakes coming down. Okay then. After they finished their meal, they got in the car and drove slowly to the train station. As soon as they arrived, Sui said, Don't bother getting out. I can manage. Zhou Jinchuan knew his actions yesterday and today had been a bit much. He didn't want to overwhelm Sui. He resisted the urge to get out and took off his military coat. Okay, I won't see you off. Wear this coat. It's cold in the snow. If you don't, I'm getting out and walking you to the platform. Also, here are some buns and eggs I had them pack up. Take them with you for the trip. It was rare to hear Zhou Jinchuan talk so much or be so fussy. If she kept refusing, she'd miss her train. She took the military coat and held it close, then got out of the car with the food. Goodbye, Captain Zhou. Drive carefully. Zhou Jinchuan looked at her. I will. If anything happens, call me. Xiaowu and Nuanyuan will miss you. Sui nodded and smiled. Okay. But there's no phone in the village, so I might not be able to call often. Tell them not to wait by the phone. Then come back soon. I will. Bye. Sui waved and walked toward the train station. Zhou Jinchuan watched her go, her figure looking fragile in the snow. As she disappeared from sight, he felt a pang in his chest. Chapter 83. I can't compare to you in terms of shamelessness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sui entered the train station and headed straight for the restroom. When she came out, the military coat she'd been carrying was gone, stashed away in her personal storage space. The cigarettes, liquor, and other expensive gifts Zhou Jinchuan had bought her also disappeared into her space. Only a few cheap snacks and some fruit remained. She'd made up her mind. This time, she wouldn't let the Su family run roughshod over her. She planned to make them pay, one by one. That meant no fancy Gifts going home. From now on, she was playing the part of a penniless, pathetic mess. Having hidden her valuables, Sui went straight to the platform. As soon as she boarded the train, she spotted Qin Yunfeng and Bai Ruolin again. Seriously? She thought, raising her eyebrows. What are the odds? Little did she know, Qin Yunfeng's ticket was for the seat right behind hers, not just connected, but practically attached at the hip. Sui took a deep breath. She wasn't afraid of a confrontation. After stowing her luggage, she sat down opposite them. Well, isn't this a fine how do you do? Running into you two again. Bai Ruolin sized Sui up, taking in her plain cotton clothes. She hadn't paid much attention at the guest house, but now she noticed that Sui wasn't wearing or carrying anything of value. She'd been stewing all night because Zhou Jinchuan had bought Sui gifts, but now, she reconsidered, if Zhou Jinchuan had bought them, why would he buy such cheap stuff? Maybe he didn't care about Sui after all, or, more likely, Sui had bought it herself. With a sneer, Bai Ruolin said, "You reek of poor." Qin Yunfeng frowned at her, displeased, but remained silent. Sui felt her poor, pitiful me persona clicking into place, and a wave of satisfaction washed over her. She said with a playful tone, "That's right, I barely make enough to keep myself fed and clothed. I'm certainly not rolling in dough like you. Wow, you bought so much to take back. I bet you're showering your mother-in-law and sister-in-law with gifts, right? They're lucky to have such a rich and generous daughter-in-law and sister-in-law like you." Bai Ruolin glared at her, stung by the comment. Most of the things she'd bought were for the wedding reception and for herself. Of course, the gifts for her in-laws were the cheapest, most obligatory items she could find. They weren't worth her spending serious money on. Qin Yunfeng had already been harboring some resentment about this, but he'd kept it bottled up. Now, Sui's comment only amplified his feelings, making him resent Bai Ruolin's selfishness even more. Seeing that Sui was simply dressed and hadn't brought much, he took out a few slices of peach cake and offered them to her. "You probably haven't had breakfast, right? Have some cake to tide you over. There's hot water on the train." Bai Ruolin watched him offer the cake to Sui, seeing how much gentler he was being with her than he ever was with her. Her nails dug into her palms in anger. "I was saving that peach cake for later," she whined. Qin Yunfeng pursed his lips. "Isn't there more in the bag? I want these slices. You dare give her a bite." The tension between the three was palpable. Sui realized this trip was going to be entertaining. She smiled and replied, "No, I'm not hungry. I'll just grab some hot water later." Bai Ruolin, seeing this, scoffed under her breath. Shameless. Trying to steal another woman's man right out in the open. The train car was packed. People had been watching the drama unfold ever since Sui had boarded. Now they were treated to a married woman accusing the single woman of trying to seduce her husband, and it seemed like the man preferred the single woman. They settled in to watch the show. At first, everyone assumed they were just acquaintances traveling home together. Now it was clear, a love triangle. Bai Ruolin was pleased to see the other passengers whispering, their comments clearly on her side. Qin Yunfeng blushed, embarrassed, and reluctantly put the peach cake back in its package. While he didn't say anything, his resentment towards Bai Ruolin grew. Sui, seeing that Bai Ruolin was about to start acting up again, couldn't help but applaud. "You take the cake. If you're talking about being shameless, who could beat you? You stole my fiancé. Do you really think what happened before you got the marriage certificate just disappears? You can't even remember the bad things you've done. You not only stole the guy but got the certificate too. And here I was, going home to help cover for you and explain things to everyone. I didn't expect you to think of me this way." That the other passengers leaned in, eager to hear more. An elderly woman sitting next to Sui grabbed a handful of pumpkin seeds from her bag and offered them to her. "Girl, what's going on? Sounds like she stole your fiancé." Sui, knowing she had a long journey ahead, calmly took the pumpkin seeds and started chatting. "Ugh, it's all water under the bridge. I didn't even want to bring it up. It's embarrassing. Over 6 months ago, I took this very train from my hometown to go visit him at the army base. When I got there, I found out he'd secretly started seeing someone else there. But he asked me not to say anything. I didn't want to mess up their future, so I agreed to keep quiet. Forget it, I shouldn't even be talking about this. Bai Ruolin was livid, her face twisted in rage. Don't listen to her lies. She's making it all up. There's not a single word of truth in anything she says. Sui brushed off her hands, then, she pulled the divorce cancellation letter from another pocket. Here, it's all in black and white, with their fingerprints on it. See for yourself. Everyone crowded around to take a look. The woman next to Sui couldn't read, but she understood what everyone else was saying. You're such a fool, girl. How can you be so nice? Even after being betrayed, you're still so kind. That's right. Don't give them the time of day. You should go back home and tell everyone the truth. I'd crash their wedding reception and flip the tables. Everyone turned to glare at Bai Ruolin and Qin Yinfeng, condemning them for their behavior. It was clear that she'd seduced someone else's fiancé, and then taken advantage of his kind nature by walking all over him. As for the man, he was trying to have his cake and eat it too. A truly reprehensible character. Bai Ruolin was furious and flustered. She couldn't argue against so many people. Spotting Sui holding the divorce certificate, she suddenly panicked. Qin, grab that paper. We can't let her keep it. Qin Yinfeng was also anxious. He'd planned to get her alone and sweet-talk her into giving it back. He didn't realize Bai Ruolin would be so impatient. Sui had been irritating him from the moment she'd boarded the train. He couldn't do anything in front of all these people, so he kept his cool. Seeing his inaction, Bai Ruolin jumped up, determined to snatch it away herself, but the train lurched, throwing her off balance, and she tumbled to the floor. Chapter 84 New Year's Goods Stalls on the Street. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sui couldn't help but crack up. He casually accepted the annulment letter he'd conjured. It's not even New Year's yet, you don't need to grovel that hard. The sight of it sent everyone into hysterics. Bai Ruolin was fuming. She whipped around and glared at Qin Yinfeng. Are you gonna help me up or what? Qin Yinfeng's face burned with shame. Hearing her yell, he had no choice but to pull her up. Seeing this, someone quipped, buddy, your taste is something else. Marine up to a bossy wife, huh? Life's gonna be interesting. Qin Yinfeng was too miserable for words. He just stood up and started walking. Bai Ruolin snapped, where do you think you're going? It's stuffy in here. I'm going up front for some air. Bai Ruolin, equally desperate to escape the ridicule, hurried after him. They huddled in the space between the train cars, letting the cold air wash over them, neither daring to return to their seats. With them gone, Sui felt a wave of relief. After chatting with the ant for a bit, he closed his eyes to rest and mentally unpacked the original owner's messed up family situation. The original owner was the third of 4 kids, 2 older brothers and a younger one. Being the only girl, you'd think she'd at least get equal treatment, but in reality, she'd been the family punching bag and the least favorite for as long as she could remember. Up before the chickens, to bed after the dogs, eating scraps, and working like a pack mule. At first, she'd fought back against her mother, but after a few beatings, she just grew numb. According to her, their face-obsessed, deadbeat father's wife got pregnant with her during a famine. She trekked across the countryside with the whole village, barely surviving. After the birth, she became a burden. Not abandoning her back then was considered a charitable act. So, in this life, she could only repay them by being a servant, never daring to complain. Living in that environment, Qin Yinfeng's kindness had seemed especially precious. That's why she'd fallen for him so hard. It was also why she was willing to follow his lead after the wedding. As for the Su family, once the engagement with Qin Yinfeng was settled, their attitude toward her improved. They were just waiting for her to marry Qin Yinfeng and send money back home to support her family and younger brother. Then Qin Yinfeng disappeared for 2 years, and the Su family's treatment of her went south fast. Finally, she'd had enough and ran off to find Qin Yinfeng in the northwest. For over half a year, the family figured she was shacked up with Qin Yinfeng, so they didn't dare to complain. They were just waiting for her to come back after the new year to settle the score. Su scoffed internally. What would those money-grubbing leeches do when they found out Qin Yunfeng had not only dumped her but brought back a new wife? Reasoning with them would be pointless, the Su family only cared about results. Without Qin Yunfeng in the picture, they'd probably have plans for her, the Qin family likely wouldn't be much better. It was gonna be a show. With that in mind, Su Yi decided to lay low in the county for a while after getting off the train, let Qin Yunfeng and Bai Ruolin go back and take the heat first. Once the family feud exploded, then she'd make her appearance. The train pulled into Los Angeles County before noon. Before they got off, Qin Yunfeng and Bai Ruolin came over to grab their luggage, both wearing stormy expressions. Su Yi deliberately waited for them to disembark first, then strolled toward the exit. Unexpectedly, Qin Yunfeng was waiting for him just outside. Su Yi, let's all go home together. Su Yi smiled humorlessly. You two go on ahead. I'm gonna grab a bite before I head out. Qin Yunfeng frowned. The family's waiting. Can't you eat when we get back? Su Yi stared at him blankly. Qin Yunfeng, do you really think my family's gonna save me any food? And don't start acting all buddy-buddy just because you're back home. Don't even try it. As soon as Su Yi finished, he waited for Bai Ruolin to blow her top. Sure enough, Bai Ruolin, who had been eavesdropping nearby, charged over. Qin Yunfeng, what's the big idea? I followed you all the way back here to get married, and you're flirting with other women. If she doesn't want to go back, fine. Let's go. Seeing this, Qin Yunfeng had no choice but to follow Bai Ruolin. Su Yi watched them go, then called out, just a heads up, you two better think real hard about what you say when you get back. If I hear anyone telling lies, I'm taking that annulment letter and telling everyone. Both of them froze in their tracks. Su Yi, don't worry. This was never your fault. It better not be. With that, Su Yi headed straight to the biggest restaurant in the county and ordered a bowl of braised beef noodles. While waiting, he also ordered 20 meat buns, 20 veggie buns, and 10 dumplings to go, just in case. He figured he wouldn't get anything to eat when he got home. Luckily, he'd boiled a bunch of eggs back in the dorm before leaving. They were still piping hot in the magic space, so he wasn't worried about food. Su Yi finished his meal, grabbed his stuff, and found a quiet place to stash the food. He asked someone where the New Year's market was and headed straight there. The market was packed, vendors hawking their wares, monkey shows, barbers. It was bustling. Su Yi found a 3-wheeled cart waiting for hire and paid someone to help him haul his stuff over from the alley. He found an open space to unload. Then he did his best to imitate the other vendors' calls. Fresh, sweet bananas, the only ones in town. Get them while they're hot. Fragrant roasted melon seeds, sweet and salty. The latest headbands from Yangqing. Spoil your wife and daughters. Su Yi shouted shamelessly. Before long, a crowd gathered. First, the stuff was fresh and kinda rare. Second, people love a spectacle, buying or not, everyone wanted to check out the novelty. Hey, how much for the bananas? You guarantee they're sweet? Su Yi smiled, picked up a banana, peeled it, and cut it into small pieces with a knife. Our bananas were just brought up from the south last night. Guaranteed ripe, sweet, soft, and delicious. Most folks in the crowd had never tried a banana before. They'd only seen them on TV. Seeing Su Yi generously offering samples, some were hesitant. We're just looking. Not buying. Su Yi grinned. That's okay. Try 'em anyway. Hearing that, everyone grabbed a sample with curiosity and excitement. Chapter 85 Calling for Help. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first customer couldn't believe it. Wow, these are amazing. How much are you selling them for? Su Yi didn't have a scale, but she remembered weighing them at Liuzi's place. The bananas were big and all the same size, about 3 to a pound. Liuzi sold them for around 40 cents each, but Su Yi figured hers were grown in the Linquan space, which made them extra healthy, so 50 cents a piece wasn't too much. Any higher than that, and they probably wouldn't sell. Sure enough, when Su Yi quoted 50 cents, people started grumbling about the price. 50 cents. That's highway robbery. I can get a whole pound of apples for that. Yeah, that's like half a pound of pork. I'd rather eat pork. Sui just smiled, not arguing. These are a bit of a splurge, sure, but they're also a rare treat. You can't even get them here, especially not in the winter. Think about it, these bananas traveled hundreds of miles from Nanchur just to get here. People considered what she said. Guess it is pretty unusual to see these up north. Quite the accomplishment. Seeing folks hesitating, Sui didn't push, she just said, hey, if you want to treat yourselves, or grab one for the kids or grandma, great. Even just one. No pressure, though. If not, that's fine too. Just consider it supporting my business. Then, she shifted to the melon seeds. We've got all sorts of flavors, and they're individually wrapped, so they're nice and clean. Only 20 cents a bag. She tore open a bag of each flavor for people to sample. Some people were still eyeing the bananas. Gimme 10. The old folks in my family can't chew much anymore. Who knows how much longer they'll be around. Might as well let them try something they've never had before. Others thought of their kids. I'll take 5 for my little girl. Still others just wanted 1 or 2. Sui patiently sliced them off with a knife. Plenty of folks passed on the bananas, but the melon seeds, especially those unique flavors, were a hit. People snapped them up. Sui was scrambling, cutting bananas 1 second, grabbing bags of melon seeds the next. She was sweating, but the money piling up made it all worth it. After that first rush, only a few bananas were left, and the melon seeds were gone. She'd paid 24 cents for those seeds and sold them for 40. Sui realized she hadn't brought nearly enough. Even with some left over, she turned almost 400 cents on the 300 pounds of bananas she had purchased for 90 cents, that was some serious profit. Too bad it was so hectic, she hadn't gotten a chance to really push the hairbands. Oh well, maybe next time she came to town. Sui saw that it was getting late, so she started packing up. As she was tidying up, she heard a familiar voice from the side of the road. What are you buying? You're gonna choke on a banana that costs 50 cents. Think your grades deserve something so expensive? Sui looked up and saw her older brother, Su Dahai, the family's golden boy. Su Dahai was the only one from their village who had gone to high school. He'd always been their parents' pride and joy. After graduation, he landed a job at the county textile factory and married the daughter of the workshop foreman. He was basically a celebrity back home. He seemed so kind and easygoing, but that was just for show. At home, especially with his younger sister, he was just like their dad, full of himself and always trying to tell everyone what to do. He'd been walking by with his daughter, who wanted a banana, but he had snapped at her the second she asked. Sui saw him and ducked her head, hoping he didn't recognize her. Fortunately, she was bundled up in a military coat, her face half hidden by a scarf. With the crowd, he didn't spot her. Once they were gone, Sui quickly gathered her things. She followed Su Dahai and his daughter to the textile factory and waited at the foot of the steps to the courtyard. Sui had decided the moment she saw Su Dahai that she wasn't going back alone. Why not go back with her older brother and sister-in-law? Her brother was all about appearances, especially in front of the villagers, and would protect his reputation so he wouldn't do anything crazy, and especially in front of her sister-in-law, he'd never let her family look down on him. Plus, her mom was more scared of this sister-in-law than anyone, so she wouldn't dare lay a hand on her in front of her. With that in mind, Sui grabbed a bunch of bananas from her space and knocked on her brother's door. Su Dahai opened the door and froze. Xiao. Sui's eyes welled up. Brother, I'm so glad to see family. Su Dahai was totally confused, but Sui had already brushed past him to find his wife, Wang Fong. Wang Fong was in the living room, listening to her daughter whine and feeling annoyed. She looked up when she heard someone call her sister-in-law and saw Sui, the Su family's black sheep who'd been gone for ages. She was holding a bunch of bananas. Sui smiled, holding out the bananas. Sister-in-law, it's been too long. I saw someone selling these outside and thought my niece would like them. The mother and daughter had literally been about to go see if the banana seller was still around, and now someone was handing them over for free. Naturally, she was thrilled. She grabbed Sui's hand and pulled her to the sofa. Xiao Yi, your brother said you went out west. When did you get back? Sui had been building up her emotions, and when she asked, she let it all out. She made up a big, dramatic story about being dumped and coming back broke. I guess I just couldn't hold on to him. Now I'm broke and alone. I'm too ashamed to go home. Sister-in-law, honestly, I got here before noon and didn't dare face anyone. I came to you because I'm desperate. Could you put me up for a few days? But when Wang Fong heard that she wanted to stay, she subtly nudged Su Dehai with a look, then she patted Su Yi's hand. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault. That Qin guy was the jerk. Why should you be ashamed? Come on. You need to go home. Don't worry, your brother and I will go with you. Sui looked at Su Dehai. Brother, you and my sister-in-law will back me up, right? Su Dehai knew Wang Fong wasn't fond of his family. She was only being nice to Su Yi because of the bananas. They had literally just been arguing about buying bananas, and now Su Yi showed up with a whole bunch, making him look good. He immediately agreed. My sister's been wronged. As her brother, I'll go back and stand up for her. We'll show that Qin family that they messed with the wrong people. Chapter 86: The Su family versus the Qin family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After talking it over, Su Dehai immediately had Wang Fong and his daughter go to his in-laws next door. Then, borrowing a bike from them, the three of them rode into the countryside. They'd been biking for less than an hour when they heard a commotion coming from the village entrance. Su Yi raised an eyebrow. Some things never changed, she thought. Hearing the noise, her folks were still going strong. Su Dehai recognized his mother, Zhang Guilan's loud, grating voice, and winced. He shot Su Yi a look. You knew they'd be all over this as soon as that kid brought someone home, yet you took your sweet time getting back. Listen to Mom. When have you ever heard her this worked up? Su Yi chuckled inwardly. He was clearly trying to smooth things over with Wang Fong, explaining away Zhang Guilan's behavior. It wasn't just about trouble, it was about her own pride more than money. Still, Su Yi played along. Yeah, sis-in-law, Mom's usually not like this. Except for giving me a hard time, I've never seen her yell at anyone else like that. Su Dehai was momentarily speechless. He didn't know what to say, and they rode the rest of the way to the Qin's house in silence. When they arrived, a huge crowd blocked the yard. Half the village had turned out to watch the drama. It was more exciting than a stage show. It only took a few steps for Su Yi to figure out what was happening. Just like she expected, the news of Qin Yunfeng bringing Bai Ruolin back had spread like wildfire before they even reached the place. As soon as the couple had walked in the door, the Su family descended, demanding answers. They claimed Su Yi had been forced to her death by the two of them, and now that she couldn't be found, they wanted compensation. No matter how Qin Yunfeng and Bai Ruolin tried to explain, they wouldn't listen. When the crowd saw Su Yi arrive, they shouted, "The Su girl's back. She's not dead." Su Yi's mouth twitched. Their imaginations were running wild. As soon as people saw her with her brother and sister-in-law, they cleared a path. Walking into the yard, Zhang Guilan immediately started berating Su Yi. How dare you show your face here, you little hussy. Why didn't you just stay dead? That even though Su Yi had the original owner's memories, she was still taken aback by her mother's tirade. She instinctively retorted, I thought Mom was so upset a little while ago. Wouldn't she want me to come back? What good would it do you if I kicked the bucket out there? Zhang Guilan's hand flew up to strike her. Of course, I hoped you'd die far, far away. We wouldn't have to be embarrassed by you. But before the slap could land, Su Dehai squeezed in and stopped her. Mom, calm down. Xiaoyi's finally back. Zhang Guilan visibly brightened when she saw her eldest son, and then her daughter-in-law behind him. She quickly lowered her hand, feigning innocence. Yangzi's here too. I was just so worked up, I wasn't thinking. Wang Fong pursed her lips and said, Mom, what's going on? We could hear the racket all the way at the village entrance. Zhang Guilan pointed at the Qin's house, spitting on the ground. That Qin boy brought a woman back at noon. We couldn't find Xiao Yi, so we figured those two had done her in, so we came over. Then she glared at Su Yi again. So where were you? Sui pursed her lips. I went to my brother and sister-in-law's to see my niece. The original owner's father, Su Xingfa, rushed over to Sui. Xiao Yi, what's going on? Didn't you go marry that Qin boy after the new year? Why did he bring someone else back? Sui paused. What did the Qin family say? Su Xingfa quickly repeated Qin Yinfeng's story. He said they got a marriage certificate, it was all legal, and they only got married after you agreed to call things off. As soon as Su Xingfa finished, Qin Yinfeng's mother sat on the ground, wailing. This is outrageous. They come barging into our house in broad daylight. It's hard enough for me, a widow, to raise a son and daughter. I finally get him a wife, and this happens. You said Qin Yinfeng harmed your daughter. Now that she's back, and she agreed to break things off, what more do you want? When we got engaged, our family gave you a dowry of 100 yuan. The Su family needs to pay that money back, ASAP. Qin's mother finally regained control of the situation and seized the opportunity to demand the engagement money back. Qin Yinfeng, standing behind her, looked helpless. He didn't know what to do to stop her, however. Bai Ruolin watched with a faint smile, seemingly pleased with her mother-in-law's behavior. Sui paused and smiled at Qin's mother. Auntie, what are you doing? Your son and daughter-in-law were hooking up long before I went to their place. You knew about it, right? Otherwise, why were you so eager to talk me out of going? And when you couldn't convince me, you hired someone to steal my luggage and push me in the river halfway. Luckily, I got out, or else it would have been the end of me. You would have killed me. As soon as Sui finished speaking, the crowd went silent, even Qin's mother was stunned into silence. You're talking nonsense. You hussy, you dare to accuse your elders of such a thing? Who harmed you? Sui sneered, you know what you did. God is watching. Justice comes to those who wait. Auntie, do you dare to swear in front of everyone? If I'm lying about you, may I die a horrible death. But if you're the one who did it, then your son and daughter will have a terrible life. Qin's mother was stunned, her face turning pale. Seeing her discomfort, Sui pressed on, do you dare? Qin Yinfeng looked shocked and crouched down. Mom, did you really have someone hurt her on the way? He'd heard from Sui about someone robbing her on the way and even wrote home about it. He had been suspicious then, but he never imagined she'd been nearly killed. Qin's mother slapped him across the face. You're married now, and you're still siding with that little tramp against me? How could I do such a thing? Seeing her guilty look, the crowd started whispering. Chapter 87, Failed to refund the money and lost 200. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While everyone was gathered, Sui decided to lay everything out. It would also prevent any future trouble from the Qin family. He pulled out the divorce letter and handed it to the village chief, who was standing in the crowd. Village chief, this is the divorce letter that Qin Yinfeng and his girlfriend wrote while I was away in the army. It clearly states that they were having an affair. He tried to force me to break off the engagement right in front of me so they could be together. To keep the peace, and to save our village from gossip, I've been biting my tongue until now. Do you think that money should be returned? The village chief took the letter, his hands shaking as he read it. He looked up at Sui. Son, I am so sorry this happened to you. He turned to Qin Yinfeng. We watched you grow up, but we never expected you to pull a chin shimmy. You really messed up. If Xiao Yi hadn't been so kind, your future would be in ruins. Qin Yinfeng hung his head. Village chief, this is all my fault. It has nothing to do with Sui. I let her down. The engagement money should be considered compensation, and I don't expect it back. Qin's mother jumped to her feet. Why is it all your fault? Son, you're confused. She wasn't good enough for you, and she wouldn't leave you alone. That's enough. Qin Yinfeng interrupted her. Mom, stop it. We're to blame for this. Qin's mother was furious, but all she could do was point at Qin Yinfeng and sob. Bai Ruolin realized that Su Yi's few words had destroyed her and Qin Yinfeng's reputation. Qin Yinfeng hadn't even tried to defend himself but had admitted his mistake in public. She felt like everyone in the village was staring at her, and she stormed back into the house. Su figured the matter was settled, so he put away the divorce letter, ready to leave, but the Su family had been waiting for this moment. Now that they had the upper hand, they weren't about to let it go. Zhang Guilan was the first to explode. So, you knew about this all along, you old witch. You kept our family in the dark and lied to us so we would give you money. And now you want us to pay it back. Forget it. You and your son are nothing but thieves and liars, and you even tried to drown our daughter. Cough up the cash and pay us what you owe. The second and fourth sons stood beside Zhang Guilan, backing her up. The Qin family has to pay, or we'll go to the army where he's stationed and make sure he gets kicked out. Although Su Xingfa and Su Dehai didn't join in the attack, they stood aside, joining the village elder in condemning the Qin family's behavior. Seeing that public opinion was turning against the Qin family, Qin's mother panicked. It's enough that we don't want you to return the money, but now we have to pay you extra. That's ridiculous. Zhang Guilan puffed out her chest. My daughter has it in writing. If you don't pay up, I'll cause trouble at his army base after New Year's. Someone will listen to me eventually. Qin Yinfeng was at the end of his rope. He pulled his mother to her feet. Mom, just get the money and pay them now. I'll pay you back later. Qin's mother glared at him. We've spent almost all our money on the wedding preparations, where do you think the money will come from? Qin Yinfeng bit his lip. We don't need a wedding banquet. Let's just give them 100 as compensation. Zhang Guilan scoffed. If you think you're getting away with 100, you've got another thing coming. You'll need to come up with 200. Bai Ruolin, who had been eavesdropping at the door, heard that they needed $200 and rushed over. Yinfeng, why do you have to pay them anything? You gave me money when you were in the army. Qin Yinfeng pursed his lips. One thing at a time. Mom doesn't have enough, so you need to take out 100 to cover the cost. They argued over the $200. Finally, Qin's mother and Bai Ruolin each handed over $100, and they finally calmed down. Su Yi had grown impatient and pulled up a stool to watch the show with the villagers. Seeing Zhang Guilan make Mother Qin and Bai Ruolin so angry, and pocketing $200 in compensation, he gave her a thumbs up. He didn't particularly like Zhang Guilan, and Zhang Guilan didn't like him, but seeing Mother Qin and Bai Ruolin squirm was pretty satisfying. The show finally ended and the Su family completely forgot about Su Yi when they left. It was his sister-in-law Wang Fang who called him. Su Yi hurried after them, unaware of what awaited him. As soon as Su Xingfa closed the door, he yelled at Su Yi, "Young lady, kneel down." Su Yi was stunned. What do you mean? Hadn't this family had enough drama for one day? Seeing that she wasn't kneeling, Su Xingfa stormed over to the corner, grabbed a stick, and said, "You worthless thing, you've brought shame to the Su family. Why aren't you on your knees?" Su Yi sneered. When we were at the Qin family, you all stood up for me. Were you just pretending for show? Today's events aren't my fault. If anyone should be embarrassed, it's the Qin family. You pocketed $300. Weren't you happy to see everyone on the way back just now? Su Xingfa was so angry that he pointed at her and spluttered, but he also knew that as a father-in-law, he couldn't yell at her too much in front of his daughter-in-law. He quickly called for his wife. After Zhang Guilan had gathered the money, she took the time to help scold her. Your father's right. You're worthless. If you had married Qin Yinfeng and gotten those monthly allowances, what would you have needed the $300 for? It was something that you couldn't foresee. Su Yi was indifferent. Oh, you were thinking about his allowances, but it's a shame they think your family is too poor, and they want to find someone better. It's a shame my plan didn't work out. Zhang Guilan was fuming, but then she thought about it. Qin Yinfeng's new girlfriend did look like she came from the city. Could it be that the Qin family boy has found a rich father-in-law? Why didn't you remind me to ask for more money just now? Regret washed over Zhang Guilan. You can go back and cause more trouble at their house and get more money. Sui was taken aback by her shamelessness. This was a one-time thing. You can't ask for more now, that's extortion. If you want to, go ahead. I won't stop you. Jean Bailian felt like her daughter had changed since she came back. She used to take the beatings and scoldings in silence, but now she came back and talked back to her all the time. For every one thing you said, she had two things to say back. She immediately forgot about getting more money, grabbed the stick from Su Xingfa, and started coming for Sui. You've really gone against me. Let's see what I do to you now. Su quickly hid behind Wang Fang, saying, Sister-in-law, you can see what my life is like here. There's no place for me here. Why don't I come back to the city with you for a few days? Chapter 88. If you don't agree, do it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After hearing this, Wang Fang forced a smile and quickly stood up to smooth things over with her mother-in-law. Mom, sis is the victim here. She's finally back home. You gotta treat her right. We'll keep an eye out for a good match in the city, Dehai and I. She winked at her husband. Su Dehai chimed in, Mom, Fangzi's right. Sis is still young. With us, her brother and sister-in-law, helping her out in the city, she'll have no problem finding someone better than that Qin family. She's been out there on her own for ages and suffered a lot. She's finally back. You should treat her well. Jean Bailian just pursed her lips and turned to Sui. So, you've been gone a while. Did you bring back any money? Sui turned her pockets inside out. Not a penny. When I left, I only had enough for bus fare, and that got stolen. I was flat broke when I got to the army, didn't even have a change of clothes. I had to rely on the kindness of strangers for food and clothes. Later, some folks at the military base took pity on me and gave me a job in the kitchen. That's how I didn't starve. How could I have any money left? Jean Bailian scoffed. Then why didn't you come back sooner? There's tons of work around here that nobody's doing, but you were out there working for free, coming back empty-handed. Sui sneered. Wouldn't I have been beaten to a pulp if I'd come back sooner? Besides, I didn't have the money. You weren't exactly offering to send me a ticket home. I had to save up. Jean Bailian sized her up, noticing her clothes were plain and worn, her bag was falling apart, she cursed under her breath. You're a total loser. Can't even get ahead. Sui shrugged. Maybe I'm a loser, but at least I earned you 300 yuan. How much of that money am I getting? I'm paying you back for my reputation. Jean Bailian, seeing that she hadn't brought a dime home, and kept asking about the 300 yuan, snapped, What are you thinking? You're not touching a penny of that money. It's for your brother's weddings. Sui rolled her eyes. There's 300, right? We 3 unmarried folks can each have 100. Ha! Dream on. You're not spending a cent of this family's money. Sui just threw her hands up, I'm starving. Haven't eaten all day. Let's get some food on the table. Jean Bailian was fuming. Eat, eat, eat. You just got here and haven't lifted a finger, but all you want to do is eat. I'm too hungry to do anything. Gotta eat before I can work. Su Dehai could see that his little sister was different after her return, likely because she'd been through so much. Seeing the two of them going at it, neither backing down, one was ready to explode, the other looked unfazed, seemed like his mother was losing, thinking staying for dinner would be torture. He made an excuse to take Wang Fang home on his bike. After they left, dinner was served, and Sui saw it was just sweet potato porridge, steamed buns, and pickled cabbage. She scoffed. You know, for a homecoming, there's not even any meat. Jean Bailian had just picked up her bowl, but slammed it back down, ready to yell. Be grateful you have anything to eat at all. You don't bring back a dime, but you expect meat. Besides Sui, the youngest, Su Sanhu, was also disgusted. Mom, did you finish the white flour buns from this morning? I want one. Zhang Guilin glared at him. We only steamed a few. Eat up, and I'll buy you some meat tomorrow when I go to town. Su Sanhu pouted. Then boil an egg for me. I can't swallow this bun. Zhang Guilin usually spoiled this youngest son rotten. Even though he was 16, she still babied him. Seeing he wanted eggs, she hurried to the kitchen to make two, one for Su Sanhu and one for the second son, Su Erqiang. Su Yi put down her chopsticks. I want an egg, too. Zhang Guilin threw her hands up. Eat dirt. You'll get eggs when you're married. Su Yi only drank 2 spoonfuls of porridge and put down her chopsticks. Fine. If you won't give me eggs now, don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. Zhang Guilin was so angry, she whacked Su Yi's bowl. You're getting too big for your britches. Then don't eat anything. Su Yi took the chance to stand up. If you don't want me to eat, I won't. And if you don't give me food, don't expect me to work. Anyway, she had plenty of food and eggs in her magic bag. It was just that the original owner had been too timid and obedient, never daring to ask for anything, so she thought to asking to cause trouble. Even if it didn't work, it would annoy them. As Su Yi stood, she deliberately lost her balance and knocked over the basket of steamed buns. Zhang Guilin was furious, but dropped what she was doing and squatted down to pick them up. Su Yi grabbed her bag and headed for what used to be her room. As soon as she opened the door, she saw it was very different from what she remembered. What happened to my room? Su Sanhu, happily eating his egg, said, your room belongs to your second brother now. You haven't been back in ages, and he and I should have our own rooms now that we're getting older. Su Yi glanced back at them. So where am I supposed to sleep? Su Sanhu grinned. The pigsty is still empty. Su Yi sneered. Why don't you sleep in the pigsty? Su Xingfa, who'd been quiet until now, slammed the table. What's all the commotion? Your brother is about to get married, and he needs his own room. The pigsty's not so bad. Just clean it up, and it'll be fine. Zhang Guilin egged him on. That's right. What are you going to do if he won't give his room back? Go make him give it to you. See if you can beat him. Su Yi's fists clenched. This family thought she was still the pushover she used to be. Looks like it was time to teach them a lesson. With that thought, Su Yi kicked the door open and went in. Then, without a word, she started throwing all of Su Erqiang's stuff out the door. Su Erqiang, who had been watching with a smirk, suddenly saw Su Yi tossing all his things out like a maniac. She even tore up his posters. He lost it. He slammed down his chopsticks and charged. Mom's right, you're a rebel. Just wait till I get my hands on you. He raised his fist and swung. Su Yi wasn't a pushover. She'd been in plenty of fights growing up, plus, she'd been drinking spiritual spring water, so she was much stronger than before. She easily dodged his punch and slapped him in the face. Chapter 89. The house was robbed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Erqiang got smacked hard across the face. I was stunned for a second, then bam, another slap. I saw red and balled up my fists, ready to go after Su Yi. Too bad for me, he dodged every punch and just kept slapping me. When it was over, Su Yi looked just fine, but my mouth was bleeding, and my cheeks were all puffed up. Zhang Guilin, seeing this, went ballistic and grabbed a stick, ready to help. Su Yi yelled, hold up. Didn't you just say the toughest guy gets the house? If you agreed to settle this with our fists, why are you trying to change the rules now? Zhang Guilin was so mad, she just pointed a finger at Su Yi, sputtering, unable to find the right words. Su Yi scoffed. If you think I'm wrong, go ask the neighbors. Does it make any sense to leave the house empty and make your daughter sleep in the pigsty? Su Xingfa, hearing her threatening to cause a scene again, slammed the table. Enough. Second-born, you're moving in with fourth-born. Seeing the complaint, Su let go of Su Erqiang's collar and asked him with a grin, second brother, you convinced yet? If not, we can go another round tomorrow. Su Erqiang, gasping, couldn't help but shout, he's crazy. Third-born is totally nuts. Su Yi just snorted. Su Erqiang, you had this coming. You've been punching me around since I was a little kid. Anyway, I've been in the army a few months, learned some self-defense. I wouldn't mess with me if I were you, or you'll end up with nothing. Su Erqiang, the strongest in the family, was genuinely scared for once. Even Su Xingfa and Zhang Guilan were speechless, not daring to say a thing. Su Sanhu was even more of a wimp and kept his mouth shut. Su Yi went inside and locked the door. The place was a mess, and I wasn't about to clean it up tonight. I'd just sleep in my special space, safe and sound. Su Yi piled up the covers on the bed, making it look like someone was sleeping there. Then I stepped into the space and scarfed down 2 hot buns. After a banana, I was out like a light. I must have been exhausted because I slept like a log that night. I didn't even realize someone had broken in and stolen something. When I woke up, my bag had been gone through. A few clothes were still there, but all the snacks were gone. I knew exactly who did it. Su Yi quietly opened the door, headed to the next room, and saw Su Erqiang and Su Sanhu still snoring away, but Su Xingfa and Zhang Guilan were gone. They'd left early. While they were out, Su Yi slipped into their room. I looked around and found my snacks and pastries on the table, with only half of them left. I'd planned to give those to the village chief to get him to help me out, so I'd brought them out. In the open, turns out, my folks were shameless enough to break in and steal them in the middle of the night. I immediately grabbed the remaining snacks and stashed them in my space. Then, I started searching the old couple's room. If they wanted to be jerks, 2 could play at that game. Su Yi found a piece of brown paper under the mattress and pulled it out. It was wrapped around a handkerchief. Inside the handkerchief was $600. I added it to my stash. Yesterday, she asked me if I wanted any of the 300 yuan, and I told her to save it for the 2nd and 4th to get wives. Fine. Now, I'm taking it all. Let's see how she gets them wives now. Next, I rifled through the closet and found a bunch of brand new clothes, which I also swiped. I never had a new piece of clothing since I was a kid. I'd always got my brother's hand-me-downs or my mother's old stuff, so now it was my turn. After that, Su Yi dug through several boxes of snacks and malted milk in the drawer under the wardrobe. The packaging was so fancy that they didn't look like they were from around here. I was starting to get suspicious and chucked it straight into the space. Then, I found some meat ration tickets, candy tickets, watch tickets, and even a radio ticket on the bottom. No idea where they'd gotten them from, maybe for the second brother's wedding. I went straight to the main room and saw a brand new bicycle parked there. I guessed they'd bought it for the second-born to help him get a date. Even though the Su family wasn't rich, they weren't as poor as I thought. They shouldn't have been eating pickled vegetables every day. That explained why the 2nd and 4th were as healthy as horses. I realized I'd been eating pickles for 20 years for nothing. I bet they had been eating the good stuff behind my back. After collecting my finds, Su Yi looked around and realized there wasn't anything else worth taking. I just came back yesterday and will stay here for a while. I'd leave the rest of the junk behind to see how they acted. I grabbed a basin of water from the kitchen, went to the room of the 2nd and 4th, and dumped it on them. Su Erqiang and Su Sanhu were out cold. Suddenly, a basin of freezing water poured over them, and they shot out of bed. Seeing it was Su Yi, they immediately raised their fists. "There's a thief in the house." I yelled and yelled, but you just wouldn't wake up. "Get up, you two. I'm going to report it to the cops." But with that, I turned and headed out the door. Su Xingfa and Zhang Guilan had just stepped into the yard when they heard their son screaming. Then they heard me claiming there was a thief and I was going to call the police. Before I could get out the door, the couple grabbed me. "Where do you think you're going?" That I frantically yelled. "Dad, Mom, there's a thief, quick, report it to the town." They held me tight, refusing to let go. "Xiaoyi, calm down, there's no thief. That's right, we just took out the snacks you brought back as gifts. We took half of them to your grandparents this morning, and they were singing your praises." I sneered. So it was a thief in the house. Good thing they didn't throw things around outside. When I woke up this morning, the place was a disaster, and I figured there was a real break-in. Messy. Zhang Guilan's heart skipped a beat. She was sure she'd only opened the bag and took a couple of things out. While she was thinking, Su Erqiang's voice came from the main room. "Dad, how many times have I told you? Don't ride my bike. If you ride it, how am I gonna get girls for a ride? Su Xingfa got so angry that he stamped his feet. What are you yelling about so early in the morning? I didn't touch your precious bike. So what if I rode it? As soon as the words left his mouth, Zhang Guilan's legs gave way, and she ran to the house. Chapter 90. The whole family is in chaos. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Guilan dashed into the main room, only to find the bicycle she'd brought in the night before was gone. Who stole my bike? She yelled, her voice cracking with panic. Su Erqiang shot up, agitated by the news. He grabbed Su Yi, a thief. Seriously? When did this happen? I didn't hear a thing. Su Yi blinked. I didn't see anything either. I woke up and realized something was missing from my bag. I tried to wake you both, but you were out cold, so I went to get Mom and Dad. But they weren't in their room, and it was a mess, so I finally got you two up. I was just about to call the cops. Hearing about her own room, Zhang Guilan rushed towards it. The wardrobe door was wide open, its contents strewn about. The drawers were pulled out, empty. Zhang Guilan's head swam. She forced herself to check under the mattress. Seeing it was bare, she passed out cold. Su Xingfa panicked. Quick, go to the village chief and borrow a tractor to get your mother to the hospital. Hurry and call the police to catch the thief. And get your older brother. Tell him to come home now. Su Erqiang, already bummed about his bike, learned that the money and ration tickets for his wedding were also gone. He slumped in the main room, refusing to move. Su Sanhu, always a troublemaker, was useless as usual. Su Yi, seeing Su Xingfa running around like a chicken with its head cut off, asked, Dad, which should I do first? The tractor or the cops? Su Xingfa, speechless with rage, just pointed at Su Yi, eyes wide. Su Yi nodded. Okay, I'll go see the village chief. Leaving the house, Su Yi went straight to the village chief's place. She told him that Zhang Guilan had fainted after their house was robbed. The village chief quickly gathered some folks and went to their place. The scene was just as Su Yi described, utter chaos. Su Xingfa cradled Zhang Guilan, pounding the ground in frustration. His two sons just sat there, dazed. The village chief shook his head. This family was hopeless in a crisis. Su Yi was the only reliable one. She knew how to get help and could explain things clearly. He immediately took charge. You two, help carry Zhang Guilan to the tractor. You two, go to town and report the robbery. Then he turned to Su Yi. Who will stay and wait for the police? Who will go to the hospital? Su Yi, looking for a chance to head into the county, jumped at the opportunity. I'll go to the hospital. It's easier for a girl to take care of her. I don't know what's missing, so the others can wait for the police. The village chief nodded. That's for the best. After the arrangements, Su Yi stuck out her hand to Su Xingfa. Dad, I don't have a dime. Can I have some money? Su Xingfa yelled, where am I supposed to get money? The thief stole it all from your mother. Su Yi pursed her lips. You don't have to yell at me. How are we going to pay the doctor if we don't have any money? Do you want her to die? The neighbors chimed in, wasn't your private stash stolen too? If not, give the girls some money already. Zhang Guilan is always good to them, but the daughter's the only one doing anything. If they were waiting on those boys, she'd be a goner. That's right. I saw Erqiang in the county buying new clothes the other day. And Sanhu bought snacks at the co-op in town. They've got money. Su Xingfa, seeing the audience, got even angrier. He dragged his sons inside. A few minutes later, he emerged with just over 20 yuan. That's all I could find. Use that for now. If it's not enough, call your brother and sister-in-law and have them come over. Only then was Su Yi satisfied. She grabbed the money and headed to the tractor. As they reached the edge of the village, they saw Qin Yunfeng and Bai Ruolin waiting for the bus. Seeing the tractor, they waved it down. Are you going to the county? Before the driver could answer, Su Yi poked her head out. We're rushing to the hospital. We can't give you a ride. Bai Ruolin rolled her eyes. Why not? The hospital's in the county, isn't it? Qin Yunfeng peered into the tractor and saw Zhang Guilin passed out. He glanced at Sui, concerned. Auntie, what happened? Is she okay? Why are you the only one taking her? I'll come with you, Sui sneered. Sure, come on up. My mother's been complaining of dizziness and feeling sick ever since she got back from your place yesterday, then she fainted this morning. It's perfect that you're going to the county. When she wakes up, she can settle the score. Did you bring the money? Qin Yunfeng immediately pulled back the foot he had on the tractor. Bai Ruolin tugged on Qin Yunfeng. Forget it. If she doesn't want to take us, we won't go. Why is she saying such scary things? Sui rolled her eyes. If you keep blocking the tractor, my mother really will die. Then you'll be sorry. Hearing that, they took a few steps back. Sui curled her lip and called to the driver. Okay, uncle, let's go. Actually, Zhang Guilin had woken up when they lifted her into the tractor but was too embarrassed to admit it. Thinking about the mess at home, she didn't want to go back. It was better to get a checkup at the hospital to avoid being blamed. Then she heard her husband and sons being stingy and unwilling to pay, and her heart sank. She was in this state, but no one wanted to go with her. In the end, it was the daughter she hated who came. Thinking about this, Zhang Guilin didn't feel grateful to Sui. Instead, she felt that all this was Suyi's fault. Just now, the kid from the Qin family was about to get on. She had to be so blunt about the money. Of course they were scared off. It was her fault. Now they would have to pay a lot of medical expenses. Zhang Guilin pretended to sleep the whole way, cursing Sui in her head the entire time. Sui knew Zhang Guilin was faking it from the moment she got on the tractor. Anyway, it wasn't her money. If she wanted to go to the hospital, fine, it was a perfect chance to get to the county and sell some more stuff from her stash. When they arrived, the driver helped carry Zhang Guilin, and Sui started calling for help. When she saw a doctor, Sui quickly explained the situation. She passed out after a shock and hasn't woken up since. The doctor was puzzled after the examination. Her blood pressure's a little high, but not high enough to knock her out for this long. Sui panicked. Doctor, is she going to die? No matter what it costs, you have to wake her up. Try acupuncture. The doctor looked annoyed. We practice Western medicine here. Sui laughed nervously. Right, I forgot. Anyway, don't worry about the money. Whatever it takes to save her, any equipment, any cost, just do it.